Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says more Canadians are losing their homes due to spending by the Trudeau government. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Ottawa is looking into bringing 5,000 Gazans who want to flee the war with Israel to Canada. And with the recent wet weather we've been receiving, the city of Lethbridge has begun its mosquito mitigation program to help keep the pesky bugs at bay.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A review by Canada's spy watchdog into foreign interference has found what it calls unacceptable gaps in accountability. The report by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency says CSIS and Public Safety Canada lacked a system for tracking who received and read intelligence on foreign interference. It also says there was a disagreement between units and senior public servants over whether activities described in briefs amounted to foreign interference or legitimate diplomatic activity. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says thanks to the Trudeau government, many Canadians may have to sell their homes since they will not be able to afford their new mortgage rates when their properties come up for renewal. Poilievre says the deficits are driving the rates way up.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, is not worth the cost of mortgages, 76% of which will become more expensive over the next 3 years, according to the federal banking regulator, OSFI. This after the Prime Minister said rates would stay low for long. We know that his massive government deficits have driven rates up 2 percentage points higher than they otherwise would be, according to Scotiabank. So will he accept my common sense dollar-for-dollar plan to cap spending and cut waste to bring down interest rates so Canadians keep their homes?
The Conservatives don't actually care about Canadians who are struggling to pay their mortgages, and we know that because when we put forward something very concrete to support those Canadians, the strengthened Canadian Mortgage Charter, they refuse to support it. When we put forward a plan to help first-time home buyers with 30-year mortgage amortizations, the Conservatives voted against it. The fact is, the only thing these Conservatives know how to do is cut, 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 and the only Canadians they care about are themselves.
Federal Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says Ottawa will be investing hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars into science and research. He says that will include a lot of incentives to help small business owners grow their businesses.
Another example of what we're doing to support innovative small and medium-sized businesses is to encourage more research and development in the country by putting $600 million on the table over the next 4 years. And this is going to be an enhancement to something that will be familiar to many of you, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Incentive, the famous SR&ED tax credit that I think has been world-renowned. I would say when I travel around the world and I talk to investors, Canada has been at the forefront, at leading edge of having a tax credit that would allow for research and innovation. And what we want to do with the Minister of Finance, there is consultation, but we want to enhance that incentive because that has allowed for a lot of small and medium-sized companies to get ahead in their respective field of business.
Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller has said that Canada will be allowing around 5,000 Gazans to flee the war with Israel and come into Canada. A big concern for many, including political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, is will they all be vetted properly so that we're not allowing Hamas terrorists into our country?
Minister Miller was not clear when asked about that. He said there would be fingerprinting and there would be attempts to do security checks. You obviously can't rely on the word of the government in Gaza. That's Hamas, a terrorist group. He was asked, are you going to be checking and vetting people with the assistance of the Israeli government? He declined to answer that. He simply said he would, be using additional partners. We have to be careful on this and ensure that we aren't bringing in people who are, Hamas members who took part in the October 7th terrorist attacks or other terrorist attacks. We need to make sure that doesn't happen.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss how NATO is putting more pressure on Canada to increase its defense spending. We'll have details coming up later in our program. The University of Toronto is asking the courts to authorize police action to remove protesters who refuse orders to leave a pro-Palestinian encampment set up on campus earlier this month. The university is asking for an order authorizing police to arrest and remove people, objects, and structures which violate the terms of the court order. It is also seeking to prevent protesters from blocking access to university property or setting up fences, tents, or other structures on campus. The protesters have said they will fight back with their own legal team and have refused to leave the site. The Israel Defense Forces say they've carried out a major military operation in Gaza against Hamas. They say more than 100 terrorists have been eliminated in the region. According to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, everywhere the Israeli military went, they encountered a number of booby traps.
In the heart of the city of Jabalia in the Gaza Strip, soldiers of the Paratrooper Brigade's combat team embarked on an intensive operation to purge Hamas operatives. During the day, these forces went from one house and one room to the next, encountering booby traps that needed to be neutralized and terrorists who fired at them. In these exchanges of fire, over 100 terrorists were eliminated as the IDF troops looked for opportunities to engage the enemy. The terrorists had set up many of their firing positions in the civilian market at the center of the city, hoping to use the civilians as human shields. But the IDF forces got close enough to direct fire at the terrorists with minimal danger to civilians, engaging in face-to-face shootouts as well as directing tank fire and airstrikes. As usual, these raids included the discovery of large quantities of weapons and ammunition, including sniper and assault rifles, grenades, RPG missiles, and other ammunition.
Praying that war comes to an end real soon. Well, we enjoyed a spectacular day across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it almost felt like summer today.
Yeah, it really did, Hal. And, it even felt a little bit muggy out there today. And with considering that we are under a severe thunderstorm watch for this evening, I guess it's no wonder. Now, that watch is for tonight, along with a slight chance of showers. Earlier today, though, much different story. It was warm, it was sunny, it was beautiful. Into tomorrow, Wednesday, we're going to see a bit of a different story again, not quite as high in temperature, only a high of 18 degrees, which is still seasonable. And we're looking at a 30% chance of showers on Wednesday as well. As for the rest of the week, well, I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about that.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Wildfire evacuation orders that forced thousands of people to flee Fort Nelson, British Columbia, and the Fort Nelson First Nation have been lifted and residents are returning home. Mayor Rob Fraser of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality says locals are happy to be back and officials will speak with them about how the evacuation was handled.
There's a lot of joy and happiness that people are back, relief that they're back. I think we're all really happy. I think, but there's still a little apprehension because we're not out of the water. We're still on an evacuation alert because of the other fires that are around us. So although we're happy to be back, we're still looking over our shoulder at that fire up to the north. Right at the main intersection coming into town, there's a meridian there, and the firefighters set up our ladder truck and hung a banner and a flag on there, and the lights are going. And last time I was down there a couple hours ago, actually, but the lights were going. There was some firefighters there waving with their gear. Yeah, so... And then I also heard that there might have been a few banners down the highway, one at Prophet River and another one someplace else. I couldn't figure out exactly where that one was. But yeah, I think that gets people excited. It gets them feeling good about being home.
Meanwhile, here in our province, Alberta wildfire officials say there are currently 31 active wildfires burning. Now, that includes 10 in both the High Level and Slave Lake forest areas and 4 near Fort McMurray. 17 of the wildfires are still active from previous years. Fortunately, none of them are out of control. Emergency officials say 94% are under control and the remaining 6 are being held. They say that 55% of the fires were caused by lightning, 29% are under investigation, being suspicious, and around 16% were human-caused. The Alberta government announced that it is investing $43 million to help train an additional 4,300 apprentices each year at the Advanced Skills Centre at NAIT in Edmonton. Officials say our province is facing a shortage of skilled trades workers and many job openings are going unfilled.
This project will be the largest investment made into skilled trades and technology-based infrastructure in over a decade, the largest investment, and it's by no means the only one. To address the shortages in the skilled trades, Budget 2024 will invest an additional $24 million per year over the next 3 years to create more seats in apprenticeship classes across the province. That was announced several months ago. Budget 2024 also invests $30 million over the next 3 years in critical updates to our high-demand apprenticeship education program, so another significant investment. Thank you. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Police say alcohol or drugs are believed to be a factor in a crash northeast of Edmonton on Tuesday that claimed the lives of 2 people. They say a speeding SUV went through a stop sign and hit a car near Smoky Lake. The driver of the car, a 39-year-old woman from Cold Lake, along with her 36-year-old passenger from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, were killed. The driver of the SUV is in hospital with life-threatening injuries. The 2 passengers from the SUV are also being treated for various injuries. A new report says social disorders on the rise in public spaces in Calgary, including transit stops. The numbers come in a new report from the nonprofit group Vibrant Communities Calgary. The study says there's been a sharp rise in problems from loitering to drug overdoses and even deaths in the Stampede City. The Dallas Stars beat the Edmonton Oilers 5-3 on Monday night to take a 2-1 series lead in the Western Conference Final. Stars forward Jason Robertson led the way with a hat trick. Both coaches spoke about how Dallas came back from an early 2-0 deficit in the first period.
You know, I think it was just about resetting. You know, we knew Edmonton would come out hard. I think it was a perfect storm. They scored early in the first period, you know, got the crowd into it, got some momentum. You know, we couldn't get any ozone shifts to kind of take some pressure off. You know, they did a good job. And I thought, you know, the second period was a chance for us to reset and get to our game. And, you know, we needed a couple good shifts to start the second period to kind of get that ball rolling. And, you know, when we did, I thought we ran with it.
Yeah, it was a complete reversal of the first period. You know, I think they really were ready to come out hard and have a good push. And we were just kind of, hopefully things would just continue sailing the way it had in the first period, caught us by surprise. And, you know, after the one of the TV timeouts, we were able to settle things down and get our game back to where it should have been. But, yeah, I think we had our start that we needed, but we took our foot off the pedal.
Game 4 will go Wednesday in Edmonton. The city of Lethbridge is moving forward with a bid to host the 2026 Scotties Tournament of Hearts. Council voted 8-1 to provide financing up to $400,000 with a hope of hosting it again at the NMAC Centre early next year. A final decision from Curling Canada will be made in January of 2025.
I think it's an opportunity to show everybody in Lethbridge not only that you know, they can aspire to become curlers at the highest level, it shows the approachability of the curlers at that level. We have a very good relationship with Curling Canada. Curling Canada loves coming to Lethbridge. They love the NMAC Centre. They love the volunteer base that we have here. They love working with the city, and we're very hopeful that they'll be back with the Scotties.
Lethbridge previously hosted the Women's Curling Championships back in 1987 and 2007, and the Tim Hortons Brier back in 2022. The city has begun its fight against the larvae produced by the mosquito. Mosquito technician Todd Carter says this is an ongoing program of monitoring standing water masses for semi-permanent bodies of shallow water. Carter says that the mitigation work is also aimed at black flies and certain species of midges.
We're just getting going on our mosquito program, following up a drought year from last season, pretty low mosquito populations. Going into 2024, nice wet spring is setting things up for bringing things up to average. Some hot weather coming up in the next couple weeks is going to start the mosquitoes hatching, and we'll start to see more and more adults as the season progresses. To get out following a rainfall, to 2 or 3 days after, we can look for our 7 to 10 day window where we'll find mosquito larvae, and we treat them with a larvicide and try to keep those numbers down before they reach adulthood. These days, maybe 1 in 5 people could be susceptible to West Nile, usually our older population. You can make sure you don't have standing water in your yard. Keep your bird baths clean and emptied with fresh water. Cover your rain barrels. If you have any standing water in your lawn, do your best to reduce that.
Carter says the work to reduce the mosquito population continues throughout the season until it gets a lot colder again in the fall. Tuesday provided some perfect weather to kick off Foodie Week here in the city. The Food Truck Festival is an initiative by the downtown Lethbridge BRZ. It began following the pandemic to get people back downtown, but they've kept up the tradition due to its popularity. Emily Chong of the downtown BRZ talks about some of the special events you can look forward to enjoying this week.
So we have 12 food trucks around Galt Gardens and in Festival Square, and over 20 businesses throughout downtown are offering free samples, so you can kind of walk around and explore downtown. On Wednesday in Festival Square, we'll have a free pancake breakfast from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then on Thursday, we're hosting for the first time our Latin America Street Party on 6th Street. So it's a family-friendly event. We'll have everything from food to entertainment to games, and we're bringing a beach to right in front of Blanco's on the street. There will be sand. There will be lots of sand. We're having 10,000 pounds of sand, so it's going to be awesome. But it is a beach. It'll have beach chairs, have some fun toys. We'll be handing out some juice with little umbrellas in them. So it'll be right in front of Blanco, so to kind of have those Mexico vibes right down in downtown.
Foodie Fest runs all throughout the week and ends on Saturday. For a full list of the event's activities, be sure to check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The final phase of construction has begun downtown on the 7th Street South portion of the cycling lanes. The construction will take place between 4th Avenue to 7th Avenue South and will connect the downtown bike lanes to the 7th Annual Bike Boulevard and the citywide cycling network. The ground was broken on Monday and is estimated to take around 4 weeks to complete. According to city officials, a full road closure is not anticipated, but there will be slight lane reductions in the area and a temporary loss of parking. Now, speaking of cycling, it was a beautiful day for a bike ride today, or maybe taking your dog for a walk along Henderson Lake or Galt Gardens, where Foodie Fest is taking place. And the warm temperatures should be sticking around for most of the week. A full look at the weather forecast is on deck. So the average high for this time of year for Lethbridge is around 20 degrees, while we were well above that today. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it is, however, kind of looking a bit like a mixed bag for the rest of the week. It'll be warm, but we could also maybe see some shower activity.
Yes, that's right, including tonight where we could see a slight chance of showers along with a severe thunderstorm watch. So that is for this evening, overnight low of 11 degrees. As we get into Wednesday, we could see that slight chance of showers again. 18 degrees for a high, so no longer that nice 20 plus degree day that we saw today, even for the rest of the week for the most part. Up to 16 degrees on Thursday, clear skies. Same thing for Friday, sunny and 18, up to 20 degrees on Saturday. Sunday, we could see some showers, high of 21, and then closing off that 7-day forecast for us, high of 23 on Monday with a mix of sun and clouds. So for the most part, we are remaining within that seasonable range, sometimes going a little bit higher as we get more into Sunday again. Average high for this time of year, 20, average low, 6 degrees, 33. That was our record high on this day. Happened back in 1986. And in 1947, we were sitting at a chilly -5. That was the record low. Sun rose this morning, 5:31. Sunset this evening at 9:27. We're so close to 16 hours. We're sitting at 15 hours and 56 minutes of daylight, 2 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. Okay, a bit of a rainy one on the west coast, looking at 60% chance of showers in Victoria, especially in the morning, then clearing up throughout the afternoon. 15 for a high there, 14 the expected high tomorrow in Vancouver with 60% chance of showers. Both Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow seeing a 30% chance of showers with a risk of thunderstorms, 30 to 50 winds in both of those cities. High of 16 tomorrow in Edmonton, and Calgary looking at a high of 17. Now those chance of showers and risk of thunderstorms also expected tomorrow in Regina Regina, 27 for a high, looking at 60% chance of showers tomorrow with a thunderstorm watch as well. 24 for a high there, 22 degrees in Winnipeg, seeing some overnight fog dissipating in the morning and then going to be sunny for the most part of the day. Now, as we get into the central part of the country, we're seeing clearing skies in both Toronto and Ottawa. High of 19 in Toronto, same thing for Ottawa. 20 for a high expected tomorrow in Montreal with mainly cloudy skies. Could see some scattered clouds there. In the eastern portion of the country here, Atlantic Canada, 21 for a high in Fredericton, seeing a 30% chance of showers there. Fredericton, Halifax, and Charlottetown, seeing 22 for a high in Halifax, 21 for the high in Charlottetown tomorrow, and high of only 11 in St. John. Also 2 to 4 millimeters of rain expected there tomorrow. So there you go. That is your forecast.
A new report says Canadians are making just the minimum payment on their credit cards compared to last year. The TransUnion report says the number of those paying just the minimum amount was up 8 basis points to 1.3%. It says millennials now hold the largest share of debt, while debt among the Gen Z crowd surged 30% compared with last year. It was mainly due to credit cards and personal loans. The report says total consumer debt in Canada was $2.38 trillion in the first quarter. That compares with $2.32 trillion in the same quarter last year. Some regions of the country are seeing a lot more growth than others, especially here in Alberta. Now, according to the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, Trevor Lewington, Lethbridge has been seeing some steady job growth.
We've actually seen a very significant increase. So if we go back a year ago to April of last year, there were about 68,000 people employed in the census metropolitan area in Lethbridge. That number's risen by almost 9,000, so there's 77,000 people working now. That's a pretty strong job growth, and the size of our workforce has grown to match. So that's good news. The unemployment rate fell to 6.4% in April, which was down slightly from March. And that's actually the first time we've seen that number pushed down since November. So very encouraging signs for sure.
Definitely. Mr. Lewington will have more on our local economy in an interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our show. Melinda Frenchgate says she will be donating $1 billion over the next 2 years in support of women's rights around the world. The former Microsoft executive and ex-wife of Bill Gates made the announcement to the New York Times on Tuesday. She says the funding will support individuals and groups who are working on behalf of women and families, including reproductive rights in the United States. She says she's been frustrated by people who say it's not the right time to speak about gender equality. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 108 points on the day to finish at 22,265. The Dow was down 216 points to 38,852. The S&P 500 was up just over a point to 5306, and the Nasdaq was up 99 points to finish at 17,019. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $2.46 to $80.18 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to $2.60 U.S. Gold was up $8.61 to $2,359.58 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 43 cents to $32.06 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.63 per bushel, barley is at $6.47, canola is at $15.16, and corn is at $7.98 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was down $1.30 to $181.60. Feeder cattle August contract was up $4.38 to $264.60. Lean hogs June contract was down 48 cents to $93.80, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.28 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a review by Canada's spy watchdog into foreign interference has found what it calls unacceptable gaps in accountability. The report by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency says CSIS and Public Safety Canada lacked a system for tracking who received and read intelligence on foreign interference. It also says there was a disagreement between units and senior public servants over whether activities described in briefs amounted to foreign interference or legitimate diplomatic activity. Well, it appears as though the Trudeau government wants to bring around 5,000 Gazans into Canada, allowing many to flee the war with Israel. Political columnist Brian Lilly will have more details for us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to check out our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. A new report tabled in Parliament shows that while CSIS was warning the Trudeau government of foreign interference by China, some in Trudeau's office outright dismissed the claims. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, why would something this serious simply be dismissed?
A difference of opinion between CSIS and the National Security Advisor for the Prime Minister. What's shocking to me, Hal, is that this came out, as you mentioned, in a report tabled by Parliament. But why didn't it come out at the public inquiry? Was this talked about behind closed doors and we don't know? This is news to me. This is news to the people who cover this even more intently than I do. Someone in Trudeau's office, and it appears it was his national security advisor, who at the time was a man named David Morrison, received the reports from CSIS and simply dismissed what he was being told as normal diplomatic activities. Trying to rig nomination contests for the sitting governing political party is not and should not be considered normal diplomatic activities. Here's the real problem. David Morrison moved on from being the acting National Security and Intelligence Advisor and is now one of the top bureaucrats at Foreign Affairs. Melanie Joly recently dispatched him to China to try and smooth things over, to improve the relationship. This is a man who clearly has a blind spot for China. I'm not comfortable with him being in that sort of position that he's in now, given his past.
Brian, Immigration Minister Mark Miller recently announced he was extending who gets to be a Canadian. Now, citizenship will go 2 generations born outside of the country. And the Trudeau Liberals say the courts forced them to do this, but what, you're not buying that, are you?
No, because it's right in their news release that that's not what happened. It was a lower court ruling. It was the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. First level court. I'm not dismissing the judges there. I'm not dismissing the judgments that come out of that court. But this sort of thing is regularly, if this sort of ruling comes out, governments will often challenge it. And they'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court to get a final ruling. In the government's own news release, they stated that they were not and did not appeal that ruling that came out last December because they agree with the ruling. So this is a political choice. This is a policy choice to say that citizenship extends to 2 generations born outside of the country. I'm born here. Let's say I had a kid in the States, and then that kid had a kid in the States. The grandchild of mine could get Canadian citizen or would get Canadian citizenship automatically. Now, there are some countries where you can apply to get citizenship, but it is not automatic. And other countries where you outright don't get it because of your grandparents. The United States, for example, or in my case, my parents were born in the UK. I was born here. I could have citizenship, but my kids would actually have to apply for it. It is not automatic in the UK. It is not automatic in many European countries, including France, Italy, and elsewhere. So we're a bit of an outlier here, and I think it cheapens citizenship. But the Trudeau Liberals, they've been doing a lot of moves on that front.
Now, Brian, the reports also say the Trudeau government is looking into giving citizenship to people here illegally. Is this a way to maybe generate more votes for the Liberal Party?
Well, quite possibly. If you wanted to be cynical about it, and I have no reason not to be cynical about it, they've extended voting to people who don't even live in the country anymore. You get to live in the last riding that you were in. I'm sorry, I thought you voted for your MP based on the fact that you live in that particular place and they represent you in Parliament. The Liberals keep extending who is a Canadian, who gets to vote in ways that they hope will benefit them. And so this move that is apparently going before the Prime Minister and Cabinet soon is meant to give citizenship to some people. Estimates vary, 500,000 or more who've been here for years, many in the construction industry, for example, that they would get citizenship. They could apply for it. Others, it would be some of the international students that are here, the 900,000 who have overstayed their visa. If you overstay your visa, you're here illegally. Well, they can just apply to be citizens now. even though they should have left the country. Failed refugee claimants. We know that with the influx of people across Roxham Road, or more recently at airports, many of these people that come in claiming asylum are actually economic migrants who are trying to skip the queue. And therefore, they're rejected because they're not actually fleeing persecution. They would be able to benefit from this. It's a very strange system. And as you say, one that is most likely just about them trying to shore up votes, which the Liberals desperately need at this point.
Ryan, Immigration Minister Mark Miller also says 5,000 people will be allowed into Canada from Gaza. Now, is this similar to the 2016 Syrian refugee program? Also, how can we ensure that these 5,000 will be vetted properly and that a few who may be Hamas terrorists won't be slipping through the cracks?
Both very good questions. This is supposed to be different than the Syrian refugee crisis of 2016. There, we brought in more than 25,000 people, and we were bringing people here to live, to escape the war zone. And by the way, conflict still continues there. Things are not good in Syria. But this program, they're talking about bringing people here temporarily. And so when the fighting stops, whenever that may be, they would go back. I'm not sure that's going to happen. If people come here and they set up new lives, a good chunk of them are most likely going to stay. But as far as vetting, that's a question that really needs to be answered. And Minister Miller was not clear when asked about that. He said there would be fingerprinting and there would be attempts to do security checks. You obviously can't rely on the word of the government in Gaza. That's Hamas, a terrorist group. He was asked, are you going to be checking and vetting people with the assistance of the Israeli government? He declined to answer that. He simply said he would, be using additional partners. We have to be careful on this and ensure that we aren't bringing in people who are, Hamas members who took part in the October 7th terrorist attacks or other terrorist attacks. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's going to be very difficult. And in 2016, the Liberals had to be forced, they had to be shamed into doing the security vetting before people came. First, they weren't going to do any security vetting. Then they said, and of course, in that case, in Syria, there were multiple factions, including ISIS, fighting there. And so you had to do security vetting so that you weren't bringing actual refugees and the people that the refugees were fleeing from on the same plane. So initially they said no security vetting. Then they said, we'll bring them all to CFB Trenton, and then we'll vet them once they're in Canada. Well, of course, you can't kick anybody out once they're in Canada. The charter will apply. So they don't have a good track record on this. Their instincts aren't good on this. So we'll want to keep a close eye. At this point, there aren't many details that they're telling us, though.
There appears to be more pressure on Canada to increase its defense spending, Brian. That includes 23 American senators writing to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, asking Canada to get a little bit closer to that 2% spending target. So just how bad is it right now?
We're well below the 2% spending target, and we have no plans to hit that spending target. Right now, we're only ahead of Spain, Belgium, and Luxembourg in terms of defense spending. I'm glad we're ahead of Luxembourg there, Hal. But we're well behind other NATO allies, including the UK, France, Poland, Germany, other NATO countries that are pulling their weight. And I'm not surprised that American senators have written, remember when Donald Trump was president, there were an awful lot of Canadians who thought, oh, why is Trump raising this issue about NATO spending? This is just Trump and right wing. Every American president has raised this issue. Barack Obama raised it while speaking to a joint session of Parliament in the House of Commons years ago. He said that we weren't doing enough. This is an old complaint from the Americans. Now NATO itself is leaning heavy on Canada, and the Trudeau government shows no signs of wanting to get anywhere near the 2% mark.
Brian, there's been some talk in Ottawa about the upcoming U.S. federal election in November. The Trudeau government is allegedly preparing for another Trump presidency. So how close is the race right now between Trump and Biden? What are the polls telling us?
I follow a few websites that track all the polls. One of them, 270towin.com. They've got them within a point or two of each other. I think it's about 1.5, 1.4% separating them nationally. A real unknown is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and what he will do in this race, and will he impact Trump more than Biden or Biden more than Trump? That remains an unknown, and not all the polls are asking about him. So in November, we could get a surprise on that front. But what's interesting is nationally, Trump has a slight lead. You go into some of the swing states and you start seeing, like, Georgia went for the Democrats last time. It had gone to Trump in 2016. Um, he's ahead in Georgia now, Arizona, places like Wisconsin. It's gone back and forth. Michigan leaning more towards Trump, but tightening. So there is a very good chance of a second Trump presidency, which is why I've been saying it's a bad idea that Justin Trudeau has been campaigning against Pierre Poilievre using Donald Trump. We could be in a situation where there's almost a full year of Trudeau and Trump having to work with each other after Trudeau's spent so much time attacking Donald Trump. Bad move.
And you say that neither Trump nor Biden are good for Canada's economy, and we kind of need a little bit of a different posture in Ottawa. Can you explain?
Well, both of them are protectionist, and I look at American politics from a view of what's good for the Canadian economy, and both of them are not against imposing tariffs on Canada, or Joe Biden's used the Inflation Reduction Act. I know a lot of people are angry about these tax credits that go to the electric vehicle manufacturers. That's there because Joe Biden put similar proposals inside his Inflation Reduction Act to try and get all of the auto production to move to the US. He was trying to get it out of Canada into the United States. But Donald Trump has tried to, shut the border to Canadian goods at times. Biden, no better. He's increased softwood lumber tariffs. He's looking right now at something that would really hurt ranchers straight across Alberta. And that is country of origin labeling. They're calling it by a different name now, but it means the same thing. So both of these gentlemen are very protectionist. We need to get to a point where we're treating them both the same. Instead, the Trudeau government treated Trump like an enemy and Biden like a friend. We need to just realize that whoever's elected, they're going to be there to look after the American people, and that's their job, and look after the American economy. We need to have a constant presence in Washington explaining that shutting the border to Canadian goods and services is bad for the American economy, and explaining why. And we can't just do it when there's Republicans in the White House. We should be doing it even more when Democrats are in the White House, because they're even more protectionist.
You put country of origin labeling on a lot of the beef, and a lot of people know that Alberta beef is some of the best in the world, so there you go. That's actually a blessing. Come on.
I have long thought that we should be marketing it that way, but the way that our system is now, it gets either finished and or processed in the United States and then just gets labeled as USA beef. And if that happens, they're going to get cut out of that processing. We don't have the processing capacity in Canada right now.
Brian, let's circle back to Canadian politics for just a moment. Let's talk about some of the polls. Last time we chatted, Pierre Poilievre was up by 20 points over the Trudeau Liberals. Where does it stand right now? And can the Conservatives maintain the momentum heading into next year's federal election?
Well, the momentum started to kick off about a year ago. If you remember, to about a year ago, the parties were still relatively close. And then over the summer, over the late spring and summer, the Conservatives started to grow and grow and grow. And it's been a double-digit lead since sometime in the fall. I don't have the full chart in front of me, but a double-digit lead since then. For the past several months, it's been a 15 to, I think the largest lead now has been a 22-point lead. But it is settled in there of high teens to 20s for probably 2 months or more at this point. So, that's the question people keep asking me. Can Pierre Poilievre keep up the momentum? In some ways, I'm not sure he has to. Governments, to a large degree, defeat themselves. Now, you have to show up and show that you're ready and able to take over. But in some ways, Poilievre could go quiet for a little while or be a little quieter and probably still just be cruising along. He doesn't need to be out there and in the faces of Canadians each and every day, which he hasn't been. But I'm just saying, Trudeau is not helping himself at this point. We had that big spending budget. We had the class warfare with the capital gains tax. None of that has worked. And by the way, that capital gains tax legislation still hasn't shown up. It wasn't in the Budget Implementation Act. They still haven't tabled legislation to bring it in. And we're less than a month. We're May 28th. It's supposed to take effect June 25th. And they haven't even introduced a bill. So there's no way this bill will pass before the Liberals say that the tax will take effect.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, the summer season is quickly approaching, so how are things shaping up on the economic front over the next number of months for Lethbridge and southern Alberta? Well, joining me to discuss this in more detail is Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Trevor. Great to have you with us once again.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Excellent. Okay, so Trevor, overall, the Lethbridge area, is unemployment up or is it down? What's going on?
Yeah, we've actually seen a very significant increase. So if we go back a year ago to April of last year, there were about 68,000 people employed in the census metropolitan area in Lethbridge. That number's risen by almost 9,000. So there's 77,000 people working now. That's a pretty strong job growth, and the size of our workforce has grown to match. So that's good news.
That is good news. That's huge.
Yeah, the unemployment rate fell to 6.4% in April, which was down slightly from March. And that's actually the first time we've seen that number pushed down since November. So very encouraging signs for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you do have some great stats available on your website. And it looks like in the first quarter of this year, there was a significant uptick in construction jobs. So what is driving that?
Yeah, we saw a 4,000 job increase from the prior month, which is very significant. I think a big driver of that is housing starts. They're up significantly versus a year ago. So that's an encouraging sign for that part of the construction sector. And then, of course, we've got very large commercial and industrial projects like the expansion of McCain Foods. That $600 million investment is actually the largest capital investment that company's ever made in their facilities. And that's happening in Lethbridge County, just right down the road. So that's great for the region and all of the trades that are involved in that project.
Yeah, no kidding. And I understand the manufacturing sector also saw some increases in jobs. So where's that coming from, Trevor?
Yeah, last month, manufacturing actually shed about 700 jobs. So we were down on a monthly basis, but that number is up 500 compared to a year ago. So manufacturing sector still very strong. And what we're seeing actually is Lethbridge beating the trend. So last year, 2023, Lethbridge region exported almost $2.2 billion worth of stuff to other places around the world. And that was an increase of 3.1%. And that happened at the same time both Edmonton and Calgary saw a reduction. So their exports actually shrank and the Lethbridge region's exports actually grew. And of course, about 2/3 of our exports from this region are in fact manufactured goods. We've got some, everything from garbage containers to jet engine parts to all kinds of finished products that are shipped out of this region. And we're very fortunate to have that diversification in our local economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you what kind of stuff that is, but there you go. Who knew? I had no idea. Thanks for that. Okay, so Trevor, there was certainly some good news for the town of Coaldale recently as well with the announcement of the new cold, which was a $222 million cold storage facility being built there. That's great news.
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, not only will it contribute a number of construction jobs in the short term, but it will add 50 new permanent, well-paying supply chain jobs once the project is complete. And of course, property taxes to the town of Coaldale once they're operational. But it's really more important when you think about Canada's premier food corridor, which stretches along Highway 3, and you think about adding new cold chain or frozen storage, really gives a lot of options to local processors, how they store and ship their products. And New Cold has a very long history of using very advanced technologies in their facilities. They operate in North America, in Europe, as well as Australia, actually. And so it's great to see a global player like them invest in our region. Tells me they understand the potential of what's going on here. And a lot of our local food processors that have frozen products can actually potentially benefit from having that new capacity in the system. So yeah, it's great all around for course, Coaldale, but the broader region and the food corridor itself.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense to put it right there in Coaldale, right in the heart of it all. Absolutely. Okay, so where are things at with the new Lethbridge and District Exhibition Agri-Food Hub? I know they ran into some serious financial challenges recently. So are there any signs that things are starting to trend in a bit of a better way?
Yeah, so there was a projected deficit this year for 2024 of about $6.5 million for the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. I know the staff are working real hard over there, both reducing expenses and controlling their costs, as well as trying to find new sources of revenue, of course. Part of the process, so the City of Lethbridge signed a memorandum of understanding with the district, Lethbridge and District Exhibition, and part of that involves a third-party review of their operations, hopefully to give that outside perspective on what could be done differently. And that process is just about to begin. So hopefully we'll learn some things as that report is being created. The key is really booking new events and really finding ways to utilize that impressive space. It's a world-class facility, and just the first week of May was one good example. There were 3 events held simultaneously on the very first weekend. There was the Alberta Esports Provincial Championships, there was Geek Fest, and there was also the High Level Innovation Conference. So if you were there that weekend, it was amazing to see these 3 big, well-done events in the same building, really a lot of buzz and traffic, and we just need to do more of that to make sure we're using that great facility to its maximum potential.
Yeah, it was hustling and bustling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Trevor, professional, scientific, and technical services saw a decline in the number of jobs. So why is that a trend there?
Yeah, so we've lost about 2,300 professional, scientific, and technical jobs over the last year. And that, of course, is very concerning to us. That sector actually nationally across Canada has seen big gains. So Lethbridge is definitely an outlier. We want to try and understand that a little bit. I personally think a part of that is the series of budget reductions we've seen at both the university and the college. Both of those institutions have seen almost a 20% reduction in funding over the last 3 to 4 years. And so, of course, that has meant headcount reductions in a lot of those scientific and professional roles. So I do think, we have an outsized or oversized public sector in Lethbridge because of our 2 institutions. And so we feel the pain of those cuts a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And how are businesses faring now with the challenge of finding workers to fill those job vacancies? Are there any particular sectors that are seeing more labor shortages than others?
Yeah, great question. We have seen a steady decline actually in the number of job vacancies. So, just over a year ago, we were north of 6,000 jobs that were vacant. That number's closer to 4,000. So we've seen a big improvement. And job vacancies, of course, are a concern because businesses often have to either curtail their production or they, maybe reconsider expansion projects if they don't have enough staff to run. So when we do our Brighter Together business survey every fall, usually what comes to the top as one of the key concerns of business is workforce and the availability of talent. And this past fall was the first time ever that workforce was not the number one concern. So that tells me things are starting to shift and we are seeing some improvement. The vacancies for the most part in our region are the skilled trades, as well as a category called equipment operators. So these are not typically entry-level minimum wage type jobs that are difficult to fill. It's more those skilled, very skilled and very skilled positions. And so, we've seen some investments from the province at Lethbridge College to add more spots in the trades. We've seen a number of micro-credentials being developed in our region. And so again, it's just working with industry to understand what are the top issues and trying to find some of those solutions.
Mm-hmm. And switching gears here to the housing market. So the prices of houses have risen quite significantly since last year. So is that good news, Trevor? And do we know what is driving those prices up?
Yeah, I think it depends a little on your perspective. It's great news if you're selling. It's not so good if you're then buying. Lethbridge was, again, a bit of an outlier. In 2023, housing prices on average in Lethbridge grew about 22%, whereas the average for the rest of Alberta was only about 12%. So Lethbridge grew almost double the pace of the rest of the province. A chunk of that is driven by population gains. So Lethbridge grew by 3.4% last year. And so in real numbers, that means we have about 4,500 new people in our region that we didn't have a year before. And so those 4,500 people have to find a place to live or to rent, right? And that's actually the fastest rate of growth we've seen since we've been tracking those numbers since 2001. At the same time, we added all of these new wonderful humans to our region. Housing starts were way down in 2023. So we dropped from about 816 in 22 down to just 243 last year. So that created a real short supply at a time when demand has never been higher. And that, of course, pushes prices up. So we've seen housing starts rebound this year. There's lots more supply being added to the market. That's really great news. But population shows no sign of slowing down. There's still a lot of movement from other provinces across all of Alberta. Alberta continues to outpace the entire country in terms of population. So I think Lethbridge will still see the pressures of that moving forward.
Yeah, I think it surely will. And with that said, Trevor, do you foresee a housing crisis happening here, kind of similar to what Calgary is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the good news is housing starts are up, so that's important. Also, it's in the multifamily category, which is typically where most families start, whether it's an apartment or a condo or something like that. The city of Lethbridge itself is undertaking a review of the land use bylaw, and the reason that matters is, of course, making zoning and building easier, which is hopefully the outcome of that process. And a number of communities around the city within the broader region have undertaken similar activities. So it's a combination of tactics from multiple levels of government, but we need to try and make it easier to build homes. We needed to make it more affordable for people to get into them.
Absolutely. Now, can you give us an update from any of the surrounding southern Alberta communities?
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about Coaldale and the new Cold investment, of course. The McCain Food investment in the broader Lethbridge County region is certainly helpful. Most communities in the region are seeing the same kinds of population growth trends that Lethbridge is, which is encouraging. We know a number of communities are holding their property tax rates flat, and a few of them have even lowered their property taxes. And that's being driven by the fact that assessed values are up so much. So that's good in the sense that we have many municipalities that are in a decent financial shape, and they're able to hold their property tax rates flat, which I think is encouraging.
Yeah.
Biggest concern for the region right now, of course, I think is the potential impact of drought as we move into the summer. And if those conditions persist, this is, of course, the third consecutive year that we'll be in a drought-like situation. So that could have a real big impact on our largest sector, which, of course, is agriculture.
Yeah, that would be a little bit discouraging, that's for sure. Let's hope things turn around there. So, Trevor, how are things looking for the ag sector? Speaking of agriculture, it's been, a really dry winter, but the rain lately must be good news this spring, right?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that reservoir levels have improved dramatically. So the Old Man, the St. Mary, and the Waterton reservoirs are all three of them are at or very close to normal levels for this time of year. So that's really good news. People can actually look at that. So the city of Lethbridge has a dedicated website page on their website that talks about water conservation, but there's also a tab where you can actually go and look at the levels in the reservoirs in real time to see where we're trending. The ag sector, of course, is going to be very cautious because, as you know, the weather can change. As the joke goes, if you don't like what you see out there, just wait 5 minutes. So again, there's a forecast to be a long, dry, hot summer. That has implications, but we'll see how that unfolds. From an overall ag sector, China's forecasted to import record numbers this year, and so that's generally good news. A lot of our exports go to the Chinese market. Cattle feeders have been downsizing some of their herds to address the rising cost of feed. So hopefully that's taken some of the risk out of the system. And right now, the Canadian dollar is fairly stagnant, which is good for exports, but not so helpful if you're importing machinery and equipment. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. The biggest factor, as always, is just watching the weather and hoping that the trend continues in a positive way.
You may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but how are things looking with the supply chain that serves southern Alberta? Is it functioning reasonably well at this point?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a good news story that we haven't seen any of the labor disputes or strikes that we've seen on railways and in the Port of Vancouver in past years. So there are no disruptions on the horizon in terms of getting out to global markets, which is good. We haven't had any of those crazy weather events that washed out highways in BC in recent years. And even globally, sure, there's some disputed areas in the world, but overall, supply chains seem to be moving well. And from a Southern Alberta perspective, we're well served by rail with the merger of CPKC, sort of that new North American railway all-in-one network that flows right through our community. We're on the Canamex corridor. Alberta's only 24/7 commercial crossing is at Coots, just an hour south. So we have all of the right infrastructure. And so far, all the trends seem to be positive that things are moving well across all modes around the world.
That's fantastic. Okay, so what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, our economy, is headed over the next 6 months, Trevor?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think people are very concerned about affordability. Of course, inflation is still a thing. We've seen inflation slow, but it's still higher than what the Bank of Canada would normally target. Interest rates have been sticky as well. There are some forecasted reductions for the rest of the year, but I don't think the Bank of Canada is going to move very far. We might see a quarter point. Again, if people were expecting interest rates to drop massively anytime soon, I don't think that's going to happen. And although things are moving well today, geopolitical concerns, things like the Middle East and Ukraine, as we all know, those disputes can boil over and become very different very quickly. I think from a local perspective, as we look forward to the US election in the fall, that has real implications regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. Canada's free trade agreement with the US and Mexico comes up for review next year, and both the Democrats and Republicans have equally said they want to see changes. So trade negotiations, I think, are going to be top of mind for government as we head into the new year. But overall, economy looks strong. Again, we're blessed to have a very diversified local economy. And so far, conditions seem to be good for our key sectors like agriculture. So I'm fairly optimistic for the balance of the year.
Great. Trevor, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate having you on, as always.
Great to be with you.
Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.